Ciao a tutti, nella fratellanza sono Jan oppure Giovanni Bestucci. So, welcome to everybody. Merry Christmas, Buon Natale. Uh, Today's topic is resources. Yes, and so people are talking about how resources seem to affect wars and conflicts and all of these other things. Well, let's talk about that. So there are two major issues in resources. One is lust, and the other is in your intelligence. So these are the two major factors contributing to the cost of resources and the struggle for resources. So for lust, I think it's pretty obvious. If there's a lot of lust and desire in society and people want all of this, meat, and if they want all of this, well, yeah, we'll just call it meat, but also sexual lust, everything contributes to great environmental destruction. The more you want, the more you burn up, the more you waste, then the more you'll feel like we don't have enough. And so I kind of find that funny. I hear that a lot. I hear complaints, from developed countries where they're like, how am I supposed to make ends meet, or how am I supposed to, well, look at what you got there and look at how much you want. Yeah, that's probably the number one thing. We have a Chinese phrase called 知足常乐. The people who know to be satisfied are always happy. And people who don't know to be satisfied or don't know how to be satisfied are always unhappy and looking for more resources. And the second major factor is intelligence. So intelligence is something we get from chastity, from a clean life, a good life. So people with intelligence naturally have less problems getting the stuff they actually need, because they can invent things and come up with ideas to make life more comfortable and happy for themselves and others. Basically, the issues I see with each country is the governments and the mafias and the organized criminal units that run the world are very keen on making you somewhat uncomfortable and keeping pressure on you to continue your desire to get zog bucks and run in the rat race and be a slave, especially to mortgages, to homes, things like this. First of all, a home is just a big box of air, and it's not something you should be a slave for 30 years. It's just a big box of air. It's shelter. It's interesting. When I was in Europe, I never saw an air conditioning unit that was as efficient as the one that I have here. Now, in China, we use air conditioning units that are heaters and air conditioners, and I run this one 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months, for winter and for summer, and I pay about, I would say between $7-8 every 2 months. So let's say $3-4 a month for electricity, and it's nice and warm in here in the winter, and it's nice and cool in here in the summer. So this brings up the question, like, what kind of air conditioners are you guys using? Why does it cost tons of money for you to run an air conditioner in America or in Italy or in Europe? Because they'll sell you an air conditioner that just eats tons and tons of electricity, and then they won't discuss key ways to save, and they won't discuss those things. I mean, like, have you ever seen somebody summarize? I mean, I know, like, in the States people winterize, but do you summarize? We have grass mats here. You can place them over all of your soft things. I don't have any soft things in this apartment because I practice yoga. I sit on my butt, and so there's no couch, no bed. But if there were, you should cover those things with grass mats because those things are really hot in the summer, and then that's not good. If you're running an air conditioning unit in a house with wall-to-wall carpeting and couches and all of these really hot things, then you're wasting a ton of energy there, right there, and nobody's probably told you that before. Um, Also, it's very apparent that in each society, we are capable of saving thousands of times more energy than we're really doing, and the only reason that we're not saving that energy is because the government and these groups are sort of blackmailing us. They're saying you will not be able to survive or be comfortable unless you are this slave and working 9 to 5 every day and doing these things. And I want to convince you that that's not necessary. I mean, on the big social level, imagine all the things they could use. Like, why couldn't America or Europe use these more efficient air conditioners and save, let's say 10, 20 times the energy? But further than that, there are so many inventions out there that governments are refusing to use. Another one that we use in China here, and we have to because we have such a huge population. I mean, we're under pressure here too, but people feel the pressure from a different proportion because we're not, so alone and individual in such a small population. So, they couldn't possibly ask that we, pay $200 energy bills every month, from an air conditioner unit for electricity, because if they actually let Chinese use that much electricity on an individual level, the whole world would be out of electricity, definitely. So, but they kind of work it into a schedule. They make it so that it gets to that point to where you can pay and where it hurts. And so, on a social level, there's other questions too. Did you know there's something like an aquilone? It's like a big kite system for generating electricity that's small, and it fits into a forest and you can't see it, and the kites run on these cables that are generally invisible, and well, it just looks a lot better than these fans that put up in the desert. These fans they're putting up in California and things, they look like windmill generators. Number one, the wind is not very strong by the earth, and number two, they're pretty ugly. Like, we shouldn't be putting these things around churches and around good-looking landscape. In With this system, they're producing something like 30 to 40 times the electricity of these ground-based windmills, and the kite just goes up and just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling, and then they collapse the kite, it falls, and they open it up again and it pulls, and they can get. I mean, think about that. There is limitless energy from incredibly powerful winds that are flying way up above our heads. I mean, it's free. And I've seen several inventions that are deliberately not being used. You could look up the whole thing with Nikola Tesla and the car that runs on static ambient electricity. No electric charging, from an outlet, and drives as fast as a regular car. And then he was forced to repress that. The newspapers reported it. They saw it. The reporters saw the invention and wrote their reports about it, but then they just had to shut up about it because that's not what the government wants. They want you to have continual dependence on this grid thing. And I think that those things, though, are what I would call social level things. We could, if we were a well-organized golden age society, we would definitely use these technologies. Like what another one of those is they've got this thing that like eats ocean waves, And the ocean wave is itself this force that nobody has to go pull or push. It's just there. And then the wave force can push the water through this big mouth, and then it desalinates the water without electricity or anything. It's completely free. There's free electricity, free energy, free wind, free everything everywhere. There's Now if we move to a more personal level, think of all the free things that we have. I want you to look up these couple of things. If you build your own house, you should consider using materials that are favorable for temperature. If you're on a flat area, then you're probably in an area with some farms that have some hay, and then you'll definitely have some sand and clay. So hay, sand, and clay makes up a material called cob, and you could build a house out of cob. They're the most comfortable houses in the world. A second design is if you're in the forest and you're on an incline on these hills, you just simply build with wood and tarps. You dig into the mountain a little bit to get some protection. The roof should be aimed still a bit downward with the decline of the hill, so the water flows off and off the front, and then the earth under the house stays dry, and then your temperature stays real nice all year round. Virtually no need for heating or air conditioning. A small wood stove will do. This brings us to the next issue, is the wood stoves. Conventional wood stoves waste a ton of energy and use up a ton of wood, and you could save, I can't remember how much more efficient it is. It's something like 1,000% more efficient to use something they call a rocket stove. So look this up. The design of a rocket stove. We could be building little houses. We could build our brotherhood in a more distant area and survive in a very comfortable environment that we built with ourselves and our own intelligence, with our lack of lust and our lack of desire for things like meat, like what you would have to do to raise animals and live in that filth and deal with all of the problems with that, not to mention psychological and spiritual. But when we're vegetarians, it's just simple. You just grow some veg outside. We have some methods for canning and storing for the winter, and Bob's your uncle, right? So anyway, to reduce the level of dependence upon society and the grid, and especially these criminal groups that are sort of blackmailing us with our wants, trying to extort us with more. Can you want to be? Are you really cold? Are you really cold? What do you want to be warm? And then they'll try to extract as much money and slavery out of you as possible. Well, we can avoid all of that with two things: with our coolness of heart, our lack of desire, and also our own intelligence. So look up some of these solutions. Look up some of these solutions and start getting your head going on how you would like to build a possible brotherhood house, a place to exist in happiness and meditate together, and also be in constant communion with God through the medium of nature. Yes, so Om brothers, and Merry Christmas.